Welcome back. This is Light Control 101. Now, as you know, in photography and in filmmaking and everything, light is pretty much everything. When using flash and artificial light, we want to be in control of the light. When we're in control, we get to dictate what the final image looks like, whereas if the light is in control of us, who knows? So there's 3 key ways that we can control light: light placement, modifiers, and understanding light behaviors. We're going to start with that third thing, which is understanding light behavior, because I think it's really the foundation. There's a book by Roberto Valenzuela called Picture Perfect Lighting. I have it right here. This book changed my life. Anyways, he opens the book up with the fact that light is light. And he says that all light, no matter the source, follows the same behaviors. And he breaks these down into 5 key behaviors that we're going to discuss right now. Behavior number 1 is angle behavior. So light can bounce off of all different surfaces. And what the angle behavior tells us is that the angle of incidence is the angle of reflection. So what this means is that the angle that light travels into a surface is the same angle that it gets reflected. And to demonstrate, got this flashlight and a mirror. And if I point this straight at the mirror, the light is coming straight back at the flashlight. But by adjusting the angle of the mirror, I'm adjusting the angle at which light is hitting this mirror and thus affecting the angle that it comes out at. So right now, there's a spot right here. That's because the light is going in and then getting reflected down at the same angle. This is also why if you look straight at a mirror, you see yourself, but then if you look a little bit to the left, you actually see like even further to the left. And it's also the same way that rear view mirrors in your car works. So this knowledge is super important for when it comes to using your on-camera flash to bounce, because whatever direction you're pointing at a surface is how it's going to bounce off. So you need to know that for bouncing your light. But where it really, really shines is understanding angle behavior allows you to get rid of unwanted hotspots and reflections. For example, this is super important when shooting people with glasses, because it's really easy to have the light come into the glasses and then bounce back into the camera lens. Generally, all you got to do is just reposition the light a little bit or position the glasses at just a slightly different angle, and you will get rid of that reflection. All right, and behavior number 2 is the inverse square law. So the inverse square law tells us that light exponentially loses power as it gets further from the source. And the formula is 1 over distance squared. I know that doesn't mean much to you, doesn't really mean much mathematically to me either, but what this means is that if our subject is 1 foot away and we're measuring in feet, that's our units, what we get at 1 foot away is going to be considered 100% of our light power. If we double that distance to 2 feet, we are now only at 25% power. We lose 75% of the power when we double that first distance. If we continue the math, at 1 foot, it's 100% power. At 2 feet, it's 25% power. If we double the distance again to 4 feet, it's 6.25% power. If we double the distance again to 8 feet, it's 1.5%. And if we double it again to 16 feet, it's 0.39%. So what you can see is from 1 foot to 2 foot, we go from 100% to 25%. But then if we go from, say, 4 feet to 16 feet away, that's only a 6% difference instead of a 75% difference. So you can see how that light fall off is so strong. Now, I understand like this is numbers and complicated, and it really makes much more sense practically, which you'll see in a bit. Behavior number 3, size behavior. Light sources, whether direct or indirect, they all have a size. And the size of the light source relative to the subject determines whether or not you're getting a soft light or a hard light. The light on my face right now is relatively soft because the light source is right here at my fingertips, and it is 27 inches in diameter. So compared to my face, it's quite large. A speed light is not large compared to my face. So if I were to fire this at my face, it's going to be a very hard light. I'm going to get hard-edged shadows and probably cast a hard shadow on that wall. But if I were to take this speed light and take a photo of this little action figure, the light source would be actually quite soft because relative to this subject, the speed light is quite large. And now distance also plays a role in how big a light source is relative to the subject. If I were to put this beauty dish 20 feet back, it's not that big of a light source anymore. Same with right here. It's very big, but if I were to put this across the room, the light source gets a lot smaller. Perfect example of this is the sun outside. Massive, biggest light source there is. But it's so far away that relative to us, it's a tiny light source, which is why outside in the midday sun, shadows are as hard as shadows can be. All right, moving on. Behavior number 4 is color behavior. All light has color, and light has the ability to change color as it bounces off of and passes through different objects and surfaces. There are 3 primary color wavelengths of light. We've got red, green, and blue. And now a white light is an equal amount of all 3 of those color wavelengths. Black is the absence of color, it's the absence of light, and it's darkness. And so what this amounts to is that if I shoot a white light into a white wall, all of those color wavelengths bounce back and I get white light. So you bounce white into a white surface, you get white back. If you bounce white into a blue surface, you get blue back because red and green wavelengths get absorbed. Now, if you bounce white light into a black surface, no light gets reflected. It absorbs all the color wavelengths and you get nothing. And changing the color of a light goes beyond bouncing. We can also shoot through translucent objects that have color tints and it will change the color of the light as it passes through. We see this with color gels. Now, aside from creativity, why do we need to understand this color behavior? First of all, one example that I think many of you have probably seen before is what happens when you try to shoot photos in the bright sun on green grass. The sun hits that green grass and it reflects an ugly green color cast up onto your subject. This could happen if you have someone standing too close to like a brick wall. It's going to reflect a reddish, brownish, ugly tone into the skin of your subjects. And, this translates to what I said about bouncing on camera flash, where if the wall is not white, you're not going to get a nice flattering light coming back from your bounce. If the wall or the ceiling are, like I said, dark wood or red toned or blue toned, that's the color of light that you're going to get, and it's not going to be pleasant. All right, we got one more. Behavior number 5 is scatter behavior. Light scatters. It bounces off of everything, and the predictability of what that light is going to do depends on the various textures and materials that make up the objects and surfaces in the light's path. If you bounce light off of a smooth white wall, what happens to that light is super predictable. But if you were to bounce that light into a very warped or bumpy wall, the light predictability is no longer there because every different angle is going to be pushing light into different directions. You can really see this with a disco ball. A disco ball is a sphere, but it's got all these micro angles, and that's why when you aim light into it, the light goes everywhere because it's all of these different angle behaviors going in 100 different directions. So scatter behavior is also what allows us to backlight haze, water droplets, any particles in the sky, because when we backlight it, we're seeing the effect of the light hitting those particles and bouncing around and scattering, and that's what makes that backlit look. Another factor that controls how light bounces off of a surface is the quality of that surface and what type of material it is. A surface that's translucent will reflect some light, but some light will also pass through that surface, depending on how translucent it is. Now, a surface that's like smooth and matte, it'll reflect light just fine, but a glossy or metallic surface is going to reflect much stronger. This is why water, metal, and glass can create such great reflections. It's because the quality of the surface. All right, those are the 5 behaviors of light. All right, the second part of controlling light is by using modifiers. We use modifiers to control the light by modifying the color, size, spread, or shape of the light. To change the color of the light, we can use translucent color gels. These go in front of the light source, just like a filter would go on the front of your lens, and the light shoots through that colored gel and then takes on the color of that gel. To change the size of the light, we get something like a big beauty dish or a softbox or a bounce umbrella. These different modifiers are designed to take the light and spread it out before it goes towards your subject, creating a bigger light source. And to build off of changing the size of the light, we can change the spread of light. This can kind of be interchangeable because when you use a shoot-through umbrella, the light goes into that umbrella and then spreads, and it effectively becomes a bigger light source. But more when I mean spread, I mean we can narrow the spread of light with the use of grids. Grids take your normal flash beam, your normal light source that's going like this, and it narrows it in. I actually have a grid on my beauty dish right here, which is why I don't get light spilling onto places that I don't want it, because my beam is narrowed to exactly where I want it to go. Now, to change the shape of the light, you can use what we call gobos. These are basically things that have shapes cut out of them, and you usually need like a spotlight attachment to make gobos work. But essentially, whatever the shape is, the light goes through that and then it projects that shape outward. Now, modifiers can also be used to reflect or absorb light. For example, you can achieve this with a 5-in-1 reflector. You can have one side that's white, that's reflecting light, and then the black side is going to absorb light. If you were using a reflector opposite the light source, you could use the white side and fill the shadows on your subject, or you could use the black side to make the shadows even darker. We call this negative fill. So there are tons of specific types of modifiers, different sizes of softboxes, octaboxes, grids, whatever, but they all come down to these key things: making the light bigger, making it softer, making the light more narrow, change the color, change the shape. They're all designed to do some form of those things, which is controlling the light. The third way we control light is with placement. The placement of our light is, the position, the angle, the direction, and the distance of our light relative to our subject. If I take this LED light and this action figure right here from Ghostbusters, look at the change in lighting just by moving the light source around the subject. By understanding the 5 key behaviors of light and using any necessary modifiers, we will know where we need to put our light to achieve our desired look. For example, let me show you how we can use these principles to achieve a dark background. So right here, the light is relatively far from the subject. With the subject properly exposed, look at the brightness of the wall behind. Now, if we keep the light at the same power and move it in really close, once we re-expose for the subject, the wall falls into complete darkness. This is crazy because the light actually got closer to the wall, but the inverse square law makes the subject exponentially brighter since it's so close to the light. Now here it is again facing the subject, light far away and light close. Now, let's pretend we're photographing the first dance and you want to light up the subject without lighting up this white wall. This is what it would look like with your flash turned on, across the dance floor and head high. And we can't simply move the light source extremely close like the last example because that would be extremely intrusive. So first, we're going to put the light as close as we can get it, which in this case, it's right out of frame on the edge of our imaginary dance floor. And we're going to get the light high so that we can angle that beam of light down and away from the wall. You can see that we still get some spill on the wall, but now we can put a grid on the light to narrow the beam of light, and it's perfect. Here's a demonstration with a flashlight. Moving the light closer and higher and angling it down, and then I'm zooming the flashlight in to mimic what a grid would do, and now we have an isolated subject with no spill on that wall. Now I know this is not a real human, but the principles are all the same. And using an action figure is the quickest and most efficient way to show you exactly what I'm talking about in real time. And so that wraps up Light Control 101. My assignment for you is to try and go outside and see if you can see these behaviors happening in real life. Go out and look for light reflecting off of surfaces. Look for that angle behavior. Look for light bouncing off of colored objects and surfaces and experience that color behavior happening. And if you have an action figure and an LED light or a flashlight, play around. See how different light positions affect your subject. And bonus points if you take out your camera and shoot some photos, because I did. It was quite a bit of fun. All right, that wraps up this video.